Jim Jordan just did something that defense attorneys dream about. He took the prosecutor's own words, his own deposition testimony, his own assessment of a key witness, and used them to demolish the case before it ever got to a jury. The witness is Cassidy Hutchinson, former Trump White House aide, star witness for the January 6th committee. She testified in prime time that President Trump lunged across the back seat of a vehicle, grabbed the steering wheel, and tried to drive to the Capitol. It was explosive. It was dramatic. It was also, according to the Secret Service agents who were actually in the car, completely untrue. Tony Ornato said it didn't happen. Bobby Engel said it didn't happen.
How about Bobby Engel? You familiar with that name?
Yes, I am.
Secret Service agent who was actually in the car that day. You know what he said? He said it didn't happen.
Both said the first time they ever heard the story was when Hutchinson testified. Now Jack Smith is sitting in front of Jim Jordan, and Jordan isn't asking about the law. He's asking about the witness. Did you confirm her story? No. Did you interview the Secret Service agents? They didn't confirm it. Did you know her testimony was secondhand hearsay? Yes. Did you say that if you were a defense attorney, you'd try to preclude her testimony because it's hearsay? Yes. Were you still considering putting her on the witness stand? We hadn't made final determinations. That's the moment. That's the whole hearing.
Were you going to put her on the witness stand if you ever got to trial?
We had not made final determinations as to who we were going to call as a witness. We had a large...
You were still considering her?
We had a large choice of witnesses in this case.
Are you familiar with what Washington Post reporters Carol Leonnig and Aaron Davis said in their book? They did this book.
The prosecutor admits the star witness isn't credible, admits he would try to block her if he were defending the case, and then admits he was still considering using her anyway. Jordan doesn't need to shout. He doesn't need to grandstand. He just needs to read Jack Smith's own words back to him and let the silence do the rest. Let's watch.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Smith, is Cassidy Hutchinson a liar? She was their star witness, January 6th committee, their star witness in one of those staged and choreographed hearings they paid the former president of ABC News to put together. She was, in fact, the only witness at this special prime-time hearing, Tuesday, June 28, 2022, 8 o'clock in the evening, and she told some stories. I mean, these were some stories. She talked about President lunged across the back seat, grabbed the steering wheel, tried to drive the car to the Capitol. And I just want to know, you think she was lying?
Chairman Jordan, my assessment of that particular issue is that with respect to the testimony about the president lunging towards the driver, my recollection of her testimony about that is that it was secondhand. She had said she'd heard that from somebody.
You familiar with the name Tony Ornato?
I'm sorry?
You familiar with the name Tony Ornato?
Yes.
White House Deputy Chief of Operations, Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, right? You remember what he said about it?
As I sit here right now, I do not.
Yeah, he said it didn't happen. How about Bobby Engel? You familiar with that name?
Yes, I am.
Secret Service agent who was actually in the car that day. You know what he said? He said it didn't happen. And they both said the first time they ever heard this story was when Ms. Hutchinson testified in the primetime hearing as their star witness of the January 6th committee. By the way, did you ever confirm her testimony about this particular incident?
We conducted, as I said before, our own independent investigation of all aspects of the case that we thought was relevant. We, attorneys from my office...
Did you ever confirm it? That's a simple question.
Well, we interviewed her, I should say, attorneys in my office before...
Did you ever confirm the president leaping across the seat, grabbing the steering wheel, this whole concoction she brought up in the January 6th hearing? Did you ever confirm that?
Right. We interviewed another firsthand witness who was in the car, who did not confirm that had happened, but also
in your deposition to the committee last month, Mr. Smith, You said this: my recollection with Ms. Hutchinson was a number of the things that she gave evidence on were secondhand hearsay. You remember us making that statement to us last month in the deposition?
I did, and I was referring particularly to what we're talking about now.
Yeah, and you also said Ms. Hutchinson, regarding this particular claim, was a second or even third-hand witness. We asked you, if you were a defense attorney, how would you handle cross-examining her if she was on the witness stand? And you said, if I were a defense attorney and Ms. Hutchinson were a witness, the first thing I would do was seek to preclude her testimony because it was hearsay. You remember saying all that?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
That's correct, right? Were you going to put her on the witness stand if you ever got to trial?
We had not made final determinations as to who we were going to call as a witness. We had a large...
You were still considering her?
We had a large choice of witnesses in this case.
Are you familiar with what Washington Post reporters Carol Leonnig and Aaron Davis said in their book? They did this book, 300-some pages book on Chronicle and the whole investigation of the Justice Department. And here's what they said on page 310. They said, Jack Smith had wondered whether some of Hutchinson's claims might be relied upon at trial. Still, at one point, Smith told the elections team he wasn't ready to give up on Hutchinson's account. Ultimately, however, Trump administration officials uniformly, fiercely disputed her accounts under oath. Prosecutors on your team told Smith they wouldn't want to use Hutchinson as a witness in court, and Smith agreed. Are Carol Leonnig and Aaron Davis, who wrote this, are they lying?
My recollection is that I certainly had not made any final determinations about who we were going to call.
And that's the point. That is the point. The fact that they used her in a primetime hearing and you won't rule out using her, or didn't rule out using her, putting her on the witness stand when everybody knows she wasn't telling the truth, that says it all. That's the degree the left and Democrats were willing to go to get President Trump, putting on the witness stand someone everybody knows is making it up. Everybody knows that. And you were willing to do it. By the way, you know how many times Cassidy Hutchinson was mentioned in their report, the January 6th report? Any idea, Mr. Smith?
I do not.
185 times. Someone that the whole country knows wasn't telling the truth, and you were still considering putting her on the witness stand because you had to get President Trump. And everybody can see that. We better take a...
Jim Jordan walked into this hearing with a strategy that most defense attorneys would envy. He didn't need to argue the law. He didn't need to debate the facts of January 6th. He just needed to let Jack Smith's own words hang him. And Smith, to his credit, didn't try to spin his way out. He answered honestly. And that honesty was devastating. The centerpiece of Jordan's cross-examination is the Cassidy Hutchinson story. The one about Trump lunging for the steering wheel. The one that dominated cable news for a week. The one that the January 6th committee built an entire primetime hearing around. Jordan asks Smith point blank, "Did you confirm it?" Smith's answer is careful. He says they interviewed a first-hand witness who was in the car who did not confirm that it happened. Not, "We confirmed it." Not, "We found evidence supporting it." Not, "The witness recanted." Just, "We interviewed someone who was there, and they didn't say it happened." That is prosecutor speak for, "We couldn't prove it." And Jordan knows it. Then Jordan pulls out Smith's own deposition testimony from just a month earlier. Smith admitted that Hutchinson's evidence on this claim was secondhand hearsay. He admitted that if he were a defense attorney, the first thing he would do is seek to preclude her testimony because it's hearsay. Let that sink in. The prosecutor in charge of investigating Donald Trump said under oath that his own star witness's most dramatic claim would be inadmissible in court. He said he would try to block it if he were on the other side. That is not a close call. That is not a matter of interpretation. That is a prosecutor admitting that a key piece of his case is legally worthless. Jordan then asks the question that Smith should have seen coming from a mile away. Were you going to put her on the witness stand? Smith says they hadn't made final determinations. They had a large choice of witnesses. That's not a no. That's a maybe. And in the world of criminal prosecutions, a maybe is a yes until proven otherwise. Jordan presses, "You were still considering her?" Smith repeats, "We had a large choice of witnesses." He never says no. He never says they ruled her out. He never says they found her incredible. He just says they hadn't decided yet. Then Jordan brings out the Washington Post book. Carol Leonig and Aaron Davis, two of the most respected investigative reporters in the country, wrote that Smith's own prosecutors told him they wouldn't want to use Hutchinson in court. And Smith agreed. Jordan asks, "Are they lying?" Smith doesn't say yes. He doesn't say the book is wrong. He just says his recollection is that he hadn't made final determinations. That is not a denial. That is an evasion. And Jordan pounces. He says the fact that the January 6th committee used Hutchinson as their star witness in a prime-time hearing, and Smith won't rule out using her in court when everybody knows she wasn't telling the truth, that says it all. He says that's the degree the left and Democrats were willing to go to get President Trump. Putting someone on the witness stand who everyone knows is making it up. The numbers here are worth noting. Hutchinson was mentioned 185 times in the January 6th committee's final report. 185 times. For a witness whose central claim was secondhand hearsay, whose story was disputed by the actual Secret Service agents in the car, whose own credibility was so shaky that the lead prosecutor admitted he would try to preclude her testimony if he were defending the case. 185 times. That is not an investigation. That is a narrative. That is a story being built around a witness who the prosecutors themselves didn't fully trust. Jordan's final accusation is the sharpest. He says Smith was still considering putting Hutchinson on the witness stand because he had to get President Trump. Not because the evidence was strong, not because she was credible, not because her testimony could be corroborated, because he had to get Trump. That is a serious charge. It is an accusation that the prosecution was willing to use a witness they knew was not fully truthful, whose key claims were hearsay, whose story was disputed by first-hand witnesses, simply because they needed someone to tell a dramatic story to a jury. Smith's response is not a denial. He doesn't say, "That's false." He doesn't say, "We would never use a witness we didn't believe." He just says, "They hadn't made final determinations." That is not a defense. That is an admission. The brilliance of Jordan's questioning is that he never had to call Hutchinson a liar. He never had to prove that Trump didn't lunge for the steering wheel. He just had to get Smith to admit that he couldn't prove it either. And Smith, to his credit, didn't lie. He admitted the testimony was hearsay. He admitted he would try to block it if he were a defense attorney. He admitted that the first-hand witnesses in the car didn't confirm it. He admitted that his own prosecutors didn't want to use her. And he never ruled out putting her on the stand anyway. That is the story of this hearing. Not that Jordan was brutal, not that Smith was evasive, but that the case against Trump was built on a foundation that the prosecutor himself knew was shaky. The January 6th committee built a prime-time hearing around Cassidy Hutchinson. They made her the star. They put her in front of 20 million Americans. And Jack Smith, the man who was supposed to turn that political spectacle into a criminal conviction, just admitted under oath that her most dramatic claim was hearsay that he couldn't confirm and would try to block if he were on the other side. That is not a prosecution. That is a performance. And Jordan just exposed it.